I'll often say in my puppy classes, don't mistake being a puppy for a problem behavior. In most of my classes, the dogs are between 8 weeks and 6 months old. So I don't really talk about adolescence or what's known as brain fog. But we could also say, don't mistake being an adolescent for a problem behavior. So, welcome to this episode of Dog Leads. I'm Steve Bishop, certified dog trainer. Thank you for joining me. First of all, I want to mention I'm trying out a new video editor, and there is a bit of a learning curve, but hopefully it comes across a little clearer, a little more stable, and it should work out pretty good. That being said, this is the third time I've recorded this episode today. There's been all kinds of problems with figuring out how this works. If I seem a little frustrated, that's why. I also want to invite you to join me on April 29th. I'm giving a presentation called A Stroll in the Dog Park, and I'll be discussing appropriate behaviors and expectations of dogs and their owners at parks and dog parks in particular. And we'll also talk about how the local laws and ordinances relate to that. Advanced registration is required, and I'm going to leave a link in the description to that and all the other presentations that I have coming up. So, all teenagers go through brain fog, which is also known as cognitive dysfunction or cognitive impairment. This is a range of symptoms that includes difficulty concentrating, memory issues, mental fatigue, those types of things. We see it in teenage humans. You think about when you were a teenager, or like I have a daughter who just turned 13, and we've been seeing some of these symptoms for a little bit now, but dogs also go through this, and they start at about 6 to 9 months, depending on size and breed, etc. And this will go through to 2.5 to 3.5 years. I talk a little bit about development in episode 20 and 21, two-part series, and I'll leave a link to that in the description also. But I wanted to delve a little more deeply into this brain fog. There's a few things happening at this stage. One of the things that's happening is what's called synaptic pruning. This is where the brain is starting to get rid of the connections that it doesn't need, and it's making connections to the things that are needed. So this can have anything to do with lifestyle or exercise or any skills or talents or anything like that that are being used or not being used. So there's a lot of development going on in the brain. They're also going through their second fear period, which again I talk about a little bit in episode 20. This is where the dog may be really apprehensive of things that they're familiar with, or fearful of things that they're familiar with, and we want to be careful because these developmental stages, things that happen to them at these times can have a lasting impact. Then dogs, even if they are spayed or neutered, they are getting this hormone surge. So we see an uptick in cortisol, which is the stress hormone that I've talked about before, among other things. And there is a drop in serotonin, which has to do with remaining calm. Dopamine levels also increase, and this is what makes new experiences more rewarding and more enticing. So the dog may respond to cues from a stranger more readily than they will from you, even though you've been working with the dog up to this 6 or 9 months. They may seem to ignore you when before they had excellent recall, for example. A quote from an article, I'm going to put a link to this in the description also. Their brain is actively seeking novelty and stimulation, and they're driven by internal chemistry to explore and push boundaries. So just like teenage humans when they start to get into their teens, figuring out who they are, what they can do. And I hesitant to use the word get away with, but it's kind of what it seems like. It's not so much what they can get away with, but what they are capable of on their own. So it's the same thing for our dogs at this age, at this adolescent stage. So the dog, just like people, they're going through a lot of stuff at this time, at this stage. So I've heard several variations on this saying, but basically it boils down to work with the dog that is in front of you. So if they're struggling to focus, lower your criteria. This may be cognitive dysfunction, but it could also just be that they're having a bad day. So when we say work with the dog in front of you, it can change from day to day, even though it's the same dog, just because of their mood or whatever's happened to them. But at this stage, we also want to think about, oh, this could be that cognitive dysfunction or that brain fog. So if it's a training session, for example, I will usually wait for about 5 seconds, particularly if it's a cue that the dog is familiar with, and then I'll do one of two things if I'm not getting a response. One of them is I will give a non-reward marker, which my dog has learned. I say, "Oh, too bad. That means you did not offer the behavior I asked for, so I am not going to reinforce it." And then we might try again. Or if the dog seems to be getting stressed or tired, we'll just end the training session. Another thing I will do with dogs, particularly with new behaviors, is I will do what I call a reset. So I ask for whatever the behavior is, the dog doesn't do it. So I do something else with them. I may have them walk in a circle, or I may have them take a few steps towards me, just anything that is different. And then we try again. And it's a way of saying, oh, too bad you didn't give me the behavior that I was asking for. So we're going to do something else. And then we're going to try again. And it's also kind of a way I constantly am saying, don't repeat your cues. We want them to respond the very first time you say it. So that reset kind of breaks that up a little bit. And it's like, okay, we've done a different behavior and now we can go back to that. So I'm not sitting there saying sit, 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 sit. If it's just a day-to-day activity, like we want the dog to respond in a real life situation. So for example, if the dog's sitting on the couch and I want to sit down where he's sitting and I say off, which is a cue for Malcolm to move, I'm not going to sit there and keep saying off, 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 off. I will encourage him. So I might say off, come on, let's get moving, move your butt, let's get going faster, that type of thing. Just like if I'm working with say a loose leash walking in a class or with a dog that I'm just teaching this to, I say with me for loose leash walking, we'll say with me, come on, oh, what a good boy, what a goodie, oh, come on. But I never say that off, moving from the couch, or with me over and over and over again. So remember that encouragement is fine, but we don't want the dog to think, I hear the cue and I can ignore it, or they're going to say it again. Oh, well, if they keep bugging me, and then you get it eventually, but that cue will lose its effectiveness. So at this age, things you can do to help the dog through this, the biggest thing is to be consistent. Be consistent in your training, be consistent in your routines, be consistent in everyday life. So the dog knows what to expect and knows what's expected of them. Okay. And then manage the environment. Don't put them in situations where they have to figure something out on their own and listen to you. It can just be overwhelming. Even though they may not seem like it, the behaviors and skills that they learn at this age are the ones that they're going to carry with them throughout the rest of their lives. And it's important to keep the training sessions, for example, short and keep them fun so that they don't learn, oh, this is a stressful situation and I'm going to avoid this later in life. When I talk about this stuff, I think of two sayings. One, a leopard can't change his spots. And the other one is, anybody can change if they want to bad enough. And I'm living proof of that second one. I won't get into details, but I went through a huge change in my late 20s, early 30s. And how it applies here is the older you get, the longer those changes take. So it's a very gradual process. And from the outside, somebody looking in, so me personally, for example, it took about 2 years, and someone looking from the outside in at, say, about 6 months, oh, well, he hasn't changed. Leopard can't change their spots. And you can. And I'm a totally different person from when I first started trying to make those changes. With our dogs, it can take a while to change those behaviors or those emotional responses. It can take longer than if we catch them when they're starting to develop, and we can mitigate those long-term impacts that have a damaging effect. So just to reiterate, you want to work with the dog that's in front of you, and don't mistake being an adolescent for a problem behavior. And I think we'll wrap up there. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this episode. Please consider leaving a like and subscribing. If you have any questions or there's a topic you'd like to hear me discuss or delve more deeply into, don't hesitate to let me know either in the comments, or you can always email me at bishopsgatetraining@gmail.com. And we will see you back here next week.